Hi guys, it's Fiona Don here. I am an Asian American singer-songwriter looking to help create safer online communities for AAPI youth and working professionals. And I'm so excited to have Executive Director of Act to Change, Ms. Soukprida Phetmisy, here with me.
It's so great to be here. Hi, everybody. As Fiona said, my name is Soukprida Phetmisy. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm the Executive Director of Act to Change, and I'm based out in Chicago, Illinois. So you'll be joining me and my dog if you hear him in the background. He's just trying to say hi.
Hi, thank you for being here with us today. And I'm very, very excited to be working with you all. But first of all, for listeners who want to know more, can you please share with me your work at Act to Change?
Yeah, I would be happy to. So, Act to Change started out as an awareness campaign under the Obama administration to bring awareness to bullying and its impact on youth, and particularly on AAPI youth or Asian American Pacific Islander youth. What started out as an awareness campaign grew into its own nonprofit in 2018. It became a national nonprofit with the focus on eradicating bullying within Asian American and Pacific Islander youth communities. And so a lot of the work that we do is to prevent bullying, but also promote acceptance, empowerment, and belonging for kids that look like me, like you, and to make sure that they truly feel like they can be themselves in all their spaces and all their communities and feel empowered to live their life.
That is amazing. In the time that you have been with Act to Change, what are the problems that you have encountered? And why do you feel it's necessary to be a part of this positive impact, particularly with the issue of bullying?
Yeah, I really appreciate you asking me this question. I've been with Act to Change since January, which has been an incredible part of my life so far. I know it's short, but honestly, it's been really rewarding because I grew up being somebody who was bullied myself. I also watched my parents be bullied when I was first going to school. And so I think I spent a lot of time wondering why my family and people who look like me were often made to feel less than or often made to feel different or other. And so I think like that has always been an undercurrent of the ways that I sought out to support AAPI youth, but also just support communities of color. Particularly with Act to Change, I think the work is so important because a lot of AAPI youth are often looking for role models, folks who look like them, and wanting to make sure that they see where they fit in, where they belong, and that they can be exactly who they are and feel proud of their identities and their background and where they come from. I think for me, growing up, I didn't have a lot of those role models, and I didn't have a lot of folks who made me often feel proud of my identity and where I came from. And so the work of Act to Change is really to make sure that every Asian American Pacific Islander youth knows that they belong and knows that regardless of where they come from, who they are, where the background is, that they have community and people like them to remind them that they are powerful and that they are also exactly enough being who they are. So I think with the work that we're doing at Act to Change, it's really important to remember that regardless of where you come from, especially when you are seemingly not fitting into the dominant narrative, if you're not white, that you have places of community where you can celebrate yourself and your culture without feeling like you are being othered or belittled or looked down upon. So I think like with AAPI youth in particular and the rise of like anti-Asian hate, it's important for us to look at how AAPI youth are being treated day in and day out and be listening to them when they feel like they are not being seen as belonging or when they don't feel empowered, that there's something going on there and that's the truth of it. So we got to show up for them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I've been in the same place as you too, growing up as an Asian American, navigating our different cultural identities here. It's kind of like a double-edged sword. It's something to be celebrated, but it's something where you can become a target of bullying or overt discrimination, prejudice, racism, right?
Yeah.
And the thing about bullying in particular, too, I mean, before social media, it was physical at school. And now it's a bit more insidious where people can hide behind a computer screen and say whatever they want anonymously. And the reason why I got into this, it has become something of mine where I don't want someone else to feel how I felt. And cyberbullying didn't happen to me until I was a working professional. And yeah, I didn't think that, at that point in time of my life, I'm already a grown person. I know my values. I know who I am. But yet it just stung me so badly that I did questioned my self-worth. I questioned why would someone attack me? And so I just felt, well, imagine someone much younger than me in high school, middle school, how they must be feeling too as they're trying to navigate, themselves and who they are in this world. And this kind of made me realize there must be so many other people who are going through the same thing. And I went online and I started to look at statistics, and there are recent stats that share kids of all ages become victims of cyberbullying, but the risk increases as they grow older. This study is a bit older. It was during the pandemic, but in 2020, it was found that 44% of all internet users in the US have experienced harassment online, which considered a type of cyberbullying. But the most common type online is like name calling, making up 37% of all harassment. But I think it's more, okay, what are the lasting impacts? It is mental. It is physical and social. So it's like we kind of have to nip it in the butt, because name calling, like for some people, they can say, oh, it's just callous, it's just a joke, but it does have a lot of damaging repercussions. And not only kids, but adults. 37 to 45% of adult Americans say they have experienced some sort of bullying as adults. It's indiscriminate, but I think that for Asian American Pacific Islander youth and adults, we do have so many other things kind of boiling underneath that have to do with like our bicultural identities or the norms and traditions of growing up in an immigrant household that also affects us too. Were there any types of issues that you encountered with Act to Change where it was maybe more predominant in our community while facing cyberbullying? Like there were other issues that were at heart too that we have to deal with together?
That's such a great question. We recently did a 2024 API Youth Bullying Survey at the beginning of this year. And one of the things we found that came out of the survey was that 1 in 3 youth expressed that they were bullied in the last 12 months if they were in school, whether that was online or in person. And if they were bullied, a lot of the ways that manifested was in feelings of anxiety or feelings of depression, negative mental health like manifestations. So oftentimes a lot of what youth were citing that they were bullied about was their actual racial identity. And so it really does connect to being Asian American or Pacific Islander or what you may look like or your background or your cultural identity. It is seen that API youth experience being bullied about their race more often than we hear about it. And the underlying stories that we've heard, particularly since I've been at Act to Change, some of the survey results that we've seen is that youth tell us that, they often get made fun of about the food that they bring to school, what it smells like or what it looks like, or because it's different. Sometimes they also, have their names mispronounced over and over and over again. And I think actually that's not just the youth thing, but it happens to adults as well. I have experience in my professional life having to repeat my name over and over again, and oftentimes feel uncomfortable when folks mispronounce it, but then trying to remind myself that that is a very sacred name that my mom gave me. It has an important history and ancestry attached to it, so making sure that folks are pronouncing it right is actually just the bare minimum. Or understanding that our food is also sacred too. We do see a lot of youth feel proud of the food that their family makes, the food that they eat. They there was a big don't yuck my yum movement. It's like reclaiming the food that we call home, that make us feel at home, and understanding kind of the different ways that manifests in identity is important too. And one of the things that I often talk about is, I was seeking out the importance of like food and pride and like, how do we think about that? Or like, how do we show affection? But oftentimes, like, at least in Lao culture, I'm Laotian American myself, food is the way that my parents say, I love you, or I'm proud of you without actually saying it. And when you get attacked for the type of food that you bring that your parents lovingly made for you to school, it can feel like an attack on like your whole family. And if it happens over and over again and you're constantly defending yourself, it starts to wither away at your self-worth. Like you were saying, Fiona, how like you've thought about that with yourself and like, oh, why is this me? Why am I being treated differently? It starts to make you question like who you are, where you come from, your identity. Like, should you be proud of this type of food or these type of features that you have? And so I think those are some of the examples where I've seen since being in active change, hearing stories from youth that it can be as innocuous as like I get made fun of for the type of food I bring to school. Or, we've also seen youth talk about how with the rise of anti-Asian hate during the pandemic, the rhetoric that we hear nationally, like calling it the China flu, has really in turn made it feel like youth are constantly defending themselves or reminding people like, oh, actually that's not what it's called, or being, scapegoated or ostracized, not wanting other kids or other adults even saying like, please don't hang around them if they're coughing. Like that ostracism, that othering really impacts you as a kid. But you were talking a little bit about how it also impacts adults. I think about the reason why I get into this work at Act to Change. A lot of the programming that we do is around like leadership development, identity development, like feeling proud of where you come from, but then also understanding the impacts of bullying. I went through Act to Change programming as an adult, and I found it to be incredibly healing for my inner child. And
Mhm.
it reminded me that like the things that you experience as a kid, the things that I experienced as a kid, they stay with me. They're still with me. I'm still healing from them today. And so I think it's important when we think about, how is like something that can seem really minor, like mispronouncing someone's name or like making a comment about how someone's food smells, can really like stick with them, because it's not just about the individual, it's about like their families, their communities, where they come from, how they see themselves. And it can lead to those manifestations in like mental health with anxiety or with depression, being worried like, well, now I don't want to bring my food to school. I want to be like everybody else, when actually there's a lot to be proud of when we embrace our own cultures. And so I think those are some of the big things that I hear about when thinking about what other problems have we encountered, what have we heard from youth, particularly in the surveys that we've been putting out there too. I think it is interesting that a lot of like, it's important to talk about how a lot of Asian American, Pacific Islander youth really do call out that they feel like they get othered or get bullied because of their racial identity, what they look like. And so we can't ignore that.
It's just so surprising to me because it's 2024
Mm.
and the things that AAPI youth are dealing with right now, I dealt with it when I was a kid too.
Yeah, me too.
Being scared to bring fried rice to school lunches, things like that. But yeah, I am happy that we are still inching step by step towards a bigger goal and mission. And Act to Change has so many wonderful programs. And recently, I believe it was in May, that you had your 6th annual AAPI Anti-Bullying Hate National Day, right?
Yep, our AAPI Day Against Bullying and Hate.
How was it?
It was really, really lovely. I got to attend as like a guest in the past years, and this year was my first time attending as like a staffer at Act to Change, so it really like hit different this year. I felt really like proud to be a part of it. This year we really decided to focus on center youth voices. So at this May 18th event, our theme was Imagine a World Without AAPI Bullying. We wanted to encourage the community, supporters, youth, other adults who care about AAPI youth to think about what it would look like to actually be in a world where AAPI bullying does not exist. And through those conversations, we talked a lot about representation. We talked about role models. We talked about what it means to see yourself as a leader when you maybe didn't see other leaders who look like you. And then for the first time, we did a youth panel that was the AAPI Youth State on AAPI Bullying, where a couple of our youth ambassadors got to get on stage and talk about their own experiences with bullying, and then also for them to put a call to action out to the adults in the room on like what we could be doing to support them in the type of world that is needed to imagine a world without AAPI bullying. And so, yeah, it was really fun. I think it was full of like community, it was full of like joy, and it was full of just like collective, like, I mean, just a lot of connection, what I would say. I think the thing that oftentimes we forget about is that when we are talking about things like bullying and anti-Asian hate or like othering, is that the antidote to that is like promoting acceptance, belonging, empowerment. And so while these are like heavy topics that we were trying to bring awareness to and the impacts on like mental health, we were also trying to say like, actually, when we feel like we belong, and especially when API youth start feeling like they belong, they actually can withstand these like moments with more community behind them, that they're more willing to like see themselves as belonging, see themselves feeling empowered. And I think bringing awareness to it also helps that feel like it's normal to talk about. Because when I was younger, the thing that I was often scared to do was talk about how bullying was happening to me. I thought I was just me. So I felt really like alone, and I felt very scared to be like, I'm getting made fun of every day for like the way my nose looks because, these kids in my school were like, your flat nose is ugly. And I would hear that all the time. And I kept it to myself. But what I saw at the event was we had a lot of youth sharing their stories and sharing them openly and saying like, this is not okay. And like, because they were able to share that, other youth were able to say like, oh, I actually experienced the same thing. And even adults were able to say like, oh my gosh, I remember experiencing that thing. And it brought people closer to one another. And it showed that like there's more community, more solidarity in place when we actually like are talking about it, and then also talking about ways to come together as a community to make sure it doesn't happen. So I think overall, I mean, there was good food, there was good music, there's good community, and a really like just beautiful message to hear from API youth, like urging the adults in the room like to take action and make sure that we're building spaces where youth can trust us to come to us if there's issues, but also to listen to them and take them seriously when they say something is wrong.
I'm so happy that Act to Change is around to provide that safe space and resources for youth and adults to be a part of this. For someone like me or someone who is interested in volunteering or wanting to be a part of policy making, what kind of suggestions do you have for us to help?
I love this question. One, thank you for wanting to help. I think, there's a little part of me that like always sees the little Soukprida in me whenever an adult is like, how do I get like into this? How do I support? And she feels like overjoyed, like, oh my gosh, there's people who care about this. And I'm like nearing 40. So I'm like, oh, little Soukprida is still alive and well. So I think like one thing I would say to get involved, one is to like, this sounds cheesy, but like check in with your inner child. Make sure that you are also caretaking for them in the ways that like, reminding yourself like what youth are going through today, I bet your inner child could really relate to. I think the first step is really engaging yourself in like empathy practices to make sure that like it's a muscle you're constantly building. I think people think empathy can come naturally, and I think it often does, but I think sometimes we need to like work that muscle and remind ourselves that we are more alike and we have more in common than we are different. And when we remember what makes us connected, it's easier to empathize for one another and then reach out and support. I think on a tactical level, Act to Change has a lot of different resources, a lot of different programs. I think as an adult, I encourage you to look at Act to Change's programs where you might be able to volunteer your time and get involved. I kicked off this interview talking a little bit about how, we're often looking for role models who look like us, and our youth are no different. So we have opportunities for adults to get involved with our programs to like be mentors to youth, to like also support them in their growth, career like growth, and also identity development. So there's opportunities to get involved there. You asked a little bit about policy. Some of the things that I would say is paying attention to what is actually being talked about in the national narrative is really important. A lot of the laws that are created, especially laws that are anti a community, I'm thinking a lot of like anti-LGBTQ laws right now that are popping up all over our country. Those laws at the national level really do impact what happens at the ground level in schools, in communities, in homes. And so following those and understanding ways that like community organizers on the ground are actively pushing against them, or ways that you can get involved in your local community and be civically engaged, is also another way to kind of be up to date on what policies are out there to really like fuel hate rhetoric, or like that may perpetuate moments of othering or bullying. And so being aware of those is important. And I think like I keep adding on, but I'll say this last thing is, talk to other folks within your communities who may also, be experiencing this. Sometimes it takes you sharing your story for other folks to feel comfortable sharing their story too. And so, Fiona, we talked a little bit about like both of us experiencing like bullying and hate growing up. And that's what made me really excited to work with you. Like, I'm not excited that you experienced that, but I felt really close to you because I knew that you would understand the experiences that I also had. And so, feeling proud to kind of be connected to you in that way because I I think a lot of times when you are bullied or when you've experienced bullying, you can feel very isolated and very alone, and you can feel really scared to talk about it. And I think like making sure that if you are someone who has experienced it, or you know somebody, or you are protecting somebody who has experiencing it, having the conversation and being honest actually brings people closer together. And so a lot of that is around awareness building and keeping communication lines open. And I think for the AAPI community, I know sometimes, at least I'll speak from my experience, like being a part of an immigrant family who worked really hard to assimilate when they first got to the US. My parents really hated hearing that I never felt like I was fitting in, or like they often were wondering like, why can't I fit in? Or like, just if you just speak English with a better accent, or if you just like don't like bring this to school, maybe it'll help. And that oftentimes made me feel like I couldn't tell my parents that I was having such a hard time. But I think like the more youth actually feel able to trust adults in their life by hearing the things that adults are also experiencing, if they are experiencing it, and bring that home to their families, it creates less stigma and it's less taboo to actually be honest and talk about it with one another. So it helps it be really intergenerational, I think, when we build those trusting relationships.
Especially in Asian American households, or at least I can really only talk about mine, but we're trying so hard to assimilate into American society. So whatever it takes to, be a part of the larger group, a lot of our feelings sometimes could be invalidated, unfortunately. With the issue of bullying online, it takes one person to make a positive impact, to call out what's right and what's wrong. I am so lucky and happy that I am a part of Asian Pacifics. It's a cohort that is giving us an opportunity as artists to learn how to mix culture with like arts and activism. And I figure with my own personal experience, like how do I turn lemons into lemonade? Something that didn't sit right with me. And how do we make it a more positive thing where we do kind of like we have our own shared experiences and we can bring light to it. And hopefully someone else doesn't have to go through it again. It was very special for me to reach out and work with you guys. And thank you again for this collaboration, because I will be releasing my song with Act to Change. And I did send you my music and music video. So I wanted to ask you what you think of it.
Thanks for sharing it with me. I enjoyed watching it. I think like some of the things that I really loved about it is that it's just like very honest about kind of the ways that you experience the online, I don't know if it's like community or like space, like what to call it, but a lot of the like the hashtags that you had on there around like even just like things that I would question when I was younger. Like you had a hashtag besties, but then the image behind it was actually like two people not talking. They were just like on their phone staring at each other. Like there were moments where I was like, oh yeah, sometimes I didn't always feel like I trusted who I was talking to on the other side of the screen. Or like, I had a facade on when I was like on Instagram, or like I try to like put on a certain like image like when I was younger, or like like you talked a lot about what filters people were using, and a lot of it was just like an allegory for me at least about like we wear so many different masks as we go through life, and sometimes like the feeling of like having to put on one more mask and just go online and like try to like be yourself, it's just hard. I think it's hard for an adult too, at least for me. I try to be as authentic and as genuine as possible, but there's also like anxieties that I have around like how do I show up? How am I being perceived? Like how are people going to like think about me? And for a while in the beginning of, I got Instagram when it first came out. I'm not going to date myself, but like also like remember thinking like, you talk a lot about like chasing the likes and getting those affirmations. And that was a really real feeling I had for a little bit there. And I think it like created some strange sense, like a strange sense of self, to be honest. Like it was like really hard to kind of lean into like who I was and who I wanted to be online, because who I am online is actually the same person as I am offline. But I think a lot of the ways that we interact with each other online often like we filter some of that stuff out. And so I really like the song for that. I like the message for that. And I think like I appreciate it even like the feeling of like grabbing everybody's phone in the music video. You're like grabbing folks' phones. And I'm like, I get that feeling sometimes. I'm just like, oh, let's just like have real interactions. Let's just like be in person. But I think like I'm trying to be in this place where trying to be the same person offline as I am online. I think that's something that we all like, at least for me, I'm like constantly navigating. Like, how much do I share? When do I share it? Why do I share it? The music video had me like revisiting those questions.
Absolutely. I definitely went through a tough time trying to navigate who I was online, and also the issue of privacy because I was cyberbullied. And so that song was kind of a play to provoke the thought of like, what is the weight of our lives truly online versus offline? And then what is like our self-perception of these realities? It is truly what we're trying to express versus who we are. But yeah, how do we view our self-importance through the lens of both worlds?
Yeah.
It was very interesting because, yeah, I remember downloading Instagram in high school, and it was a photo diary.
Yes,
It wasn't to get likes and follower accounts and maybe a brand partnership. Some people who their thoughts and their expertise are truly valued and they should be compensated for it. But it's like, that's what kind of spectrum are we trying to live online? And that was just an idea that I wanted to share with people, because if you get too caught up in it, I don't think it's too good for our mental health either.
Yeah.
That it is nice to have face-to-face conversations or not have to take a photo or share an experience if you're just hiking through the woods, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. What was the process like for you finally like putting all of like both the emotions and the feeling, the experience of like being cyberbullied and then putting that onto a music video?
I think deep inside it helped me get over my fear of posting online again too, and feeling super empowered. And my main goal is like, if some person out there feels the same way and feels a little bit better about himself or herself, I think I've done my job. Where can we go help? Is there a link that you can share with us if we want to know more about Act to Change?
Yeah, definitely. Please check out our website. It's acttochange.org. All of our resources, our programs can be found on there. Please follow Act to Change across all social medias. We are Act to Change. So follow us there. And I really appreciate being in this space with you. And thank you for collaborating with us in this way.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you for your time, and looking forward to talking with you soon again.
Thank you.